In case you didn't know, me and Lenny work at a record label, and at the end of the video that we made last week, we asked you to ask us some questions about what it's actually like to work at a record label. So this is what this video is. We are going to answer the questions that you've asked us about what it's like to work at a record label.
So we will start with this question, mainly because it's a good intro to people who may be confused a little bit about kind of what record labels do. So the question is, what can a record label do for a band? It seems conflicting. How much control do they actually have?
Well, I suppose the original primary function of a record label was to simply be the funding body that gave the band the money to create music and release it and promote it. Nowadays, a record label can do many things. So, for instance, we do that. We put money into artists, let them record, let them rehearse, let them write songs, and then we release the music. We also do a thing called music publishing, which I'm not sure if many record labels actually do this, but we do. And that is the process of collecting royalties for bands when they play gigs. So every time you play a gig, you are generating royalties for every single song you play. We then, as a record label, collect that money for you.
I think it used to be, like what you were on about in the past, was record labels were almost like part of the band. Like, we recently did some work with a guy called Elliot Kennedy, who's a producer in Sheffield, and we shot some videos with him, and when we shot them videos, one of the things that he actually said was, record labels in the past used to...
Why does it do this?
Answering the question for us. Rude, Siri. The A&R at a record label would actually also engineer or produce the artist that they had signed to the record label. So nowadays when you've got people saying, oh, record labels are a bad thing because they're so controlling and you don't have any creative vision when you're with a record label or whatever. That's very much an old record label kind of thing that's carried over because record labels had such a hands-on approach with their bands.
And with a lot of major record labels, the whole problem of an artist being worried about what creative input the label has on them, that's only really prevalent with like major labels and things. It's only the major labels like Sony or Warner that will actually hire songwriters to write songs for the artist and then hire beauticians and wardrobe people and anyone but the band to decide how the band is going to be. With the vast majority of independent record labels, this just isn't the case.
Yeah. So your stereotypical like kind of manufactured bands only happen through like the big record labels. It's just not a thing that exists for the majority of the music industry.
And I suppose it was more of a common thing in the past because there weren't really independent labels in the past. There
just
were
wasn't
only
an
the major
opportunity for that
labels.
to be a thing, really, was there?
Yeah.
The climate's just different, especially with the digital age. So you can put stuff on Bandcamp and iTunes and Spotify exist. Like the playing field is way more level now.
Mm. Yes, independent record labels might like involve a producer or a branding expert to come in and coach the band.
Yeah.
I very much doubt there are many small independent labels that actually control what the band is.
So to properly answer your question, it varies from record label to record label. There's no definitive this is what record labels do and this is what record labels don't do, because it will vary from deal to deal. Okay, this leads quite nicely into the next question, which is, do record labels expect high quality recordings from beginner bands? And I will then add a little section onto the end of that, which is, how do we feel about demos?
That's a bit of a weird question because, say for instance, a record label is paying for the production of an artist's music. They're the ones paying for it and they're the ones deciding what studio you go to. So, if anything, it is kind of up to them what quality product you get out of it. But if you're referring to sending your music into a record label, ideally, yes, it needs to be of some quality, unless you define specifically that it is a demo.
For me, a good song is always a good song. Whether you're talking about good quality or bad quality recording, a good song should be able to stand out that it's a good song even with a bad recording. However, first impressions are really important, and it's really easy to spot a bad mix before you spot, oh, this is a good song. So it's worth thinking about. Like, if your recording is kinda naff, it's probably not worth sending. If it's anything from like average up, that's probably fine, whether that is a demo or an actual recording.
If you send a really bad recording to a record label and act as if it is your final mix and it's like, oh yeah, this is our new amazing song, we put it out last week, what do you think? The record label's going to be turned off because the mix is shit.
Yes, you are much better off in that situation saying this is a demo for our song. Even if you think it's the best recording ever, if you've sent it to a few family members or whatever and they're like, "Ooh, not so sure about that," or whatever, maybe play it down as if it's a demo, because there's a chance that your average recording sounds like a really good demo or a really bad final product. So it's just about kind of perspective from that side of stuff. Yeah, and how do you feel about being sent demos?
I think it shows the fact that the artist is aware that their music is a demo, because a lot of artists will go into the bedroom and they'll record some sample drums or whatever and they'll stick some shit guitar over it and they'll call it their first single, and it will be shit in all senses of the word. So if an artist has the ability to know when their music is of demo quality, then that is sort of, it's not impressive, but it's nice to see that, I think.
Yeah. I agree with that. In terms of being sent demos to the record label, I don't have a problem with it, just because if a record label is going to take you on as an actual recording artist, as Joe said at the beginning, there's a very high likelihood that the record label will actually pay for you to go into the studio to get it recorded anyway, but so you don't need a finished product to actually send to a label. Although it is sometimes nice to hear a final track, just because you see that final vision, whereas obviously in a demo you might want synths but you can't get synths, and the final drum kit isn't the right sound, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fine. It does the job of us being able to hear music that isn't finished, just to get a kind of gist on what you're going for. So this is 2 questions from one person. I'd love to know the pros and cons of working at a record label, and on the opposite, do record labels prefer bands who release albums or EPs before they get signed? So we'll start with the first question, pros and cons of working at a record label.
For me, the biggest pro of working at a record label is the fact that it's the music industry. Everyone wants to work in the music industry. It's really glamorous. It's not glamorous by any means.
So it's a desk job.
But as in, it's very sought after by a lot of people, and
yeah, I think we're lucky to be where we are.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunity in the music industry to have fun with what you're doing, and a lot of times it doesn't seem like work. However, the main con for me about working in the music industry is the fact that most people who work in it get into it because they are hobbyists. They like playing music, they have watched MTV once and they go, oh yeah, I could do that job, I could be a producer, I could be a record label person, and because of that they don't have the training or education necessary to actually do the job that they have been hired to do. They have been hired on 1, their appearance, or 2, their personality, because I think that for a lot of employers in the music industry, that is more important than the actual capability of the person. There has been many a time where I have dealt with someone who works for another music company who looks the part and sounds the part. He's like, oh yeah, I'm really quirky, I'm in the music industry, got a beanie hat and a checkered shirt, shit like that. But they don't treat it like a job, they treat it like a hobby. And coming off of that, there's a lot of people who work in the music industry who don't do it full time, who actually do it as a hobby, e.g. someone who runs a record label in their own time, or someone who does a music job in their own time, and because it is their hobby, they don't treat it like a business. And when you get people who don't treat it like a business with professionalism, that's where it starts to get really shit and annoying for the people that try and treat it like a business.
There's a lot of people who will not necessarily waste your time, but if you're trying to do something and you are relying on someone else to do a part of that, whether that's you're ordering CDs or whatever, like something that you can't do alone, you have to expect that person to let you down, even if it's there a few days late, or they cancel on you at the last minute, or whatever. It happens all the time, and I think that is genuinely the biggest con of the music industry, just because it feels like it should be glamorous to work in, and it's actually just quite stressful, just because you're sat waiting for other people to do stuff before you can do things you actually want to do.
That can be said for a lot of careers though.
I mean, that's probably true.
But I think it is accentuated in the music industry because of the fact that most people who work in it aren't fully, they don't treat it as a job.
Yeah.
Even bands, we have to stress to bands all the time, you have to treat your music career, or like a career from day one, you have to treat your band like a business.
Yeah.
And that's not really something you should be saying. If you are wanting to be successful in the music industry, you have to behave professionally from day one.
I'll say a pro, because I didn't actually say a pro. Like the fact that maybe working festivals or going to gigs is technically part of the job is really cool.
I quite enjoy reviewing music as well because it gives me a chance to actually listen to things and analyse things and give good feedback to people.
And you do writing anyway, like that's something that you enjoy doing. So, how do you feel about signing artists that have already got like? Let's reword it as: how do you feel about signing artists that have already kind of a discography behind them?
I think it is entirely dependent on how successful that discography was. If there is a band that has released 7 albums and they're still playing gigs at like a pub every fucking Wednesday, then for me that is a turn off because it shows that they have had no idea what they're doing. And I suppose it depends on if the music they've released in the past is any good. If a band comes to me with, they've released, 2 EPs and they're good songs, yeah, that's really good. I'd be happy with that. But if they've released 2 EPs that are shit songs, then it's like, no. I suppose it does depend on whether the music they're creating and have created is any good.
Yeah. Because this is a business, I feel as though I have to mention this. It's not just about good songs. You could get sent some music that's maybe like 1 EP. They've only done 1 EP. And maybe you don't think it's that good. But they've got a large following. They've got loads of people kind of listening to it. That is really a bigger turn on, if you like, than 7 albums of really good music that no one actually listens to, which would be a much bigger turn off. So just being good music sometimes isn't enough.
Yeah, as much as it's sad to say, like us as a label, we kind of have to look into which artists are more likely to make money. As sad as that is, because it is a business, as you said.
That's just how that works. It's like if you worked in a shop and you chose 2 products to stock, but in a year's time you were only going to stock one of them and you were going to discontinue the other, whichever one sold best in that first year would continue for the second year. That's just how that works.
Even if you personally preferred the other one and you could think of 1,000,001 reasons why that one is actually better,
it's not your choice. Yeah, it's just down to how fans accept, and yes, there's more to it than that because there's how much money did you pump into marketing, did it get radio play, did blogs pick it up, did it get reviews, how well did it do on social media, were people sharing it on social media? There's so much more that goes into whether or not people listen to your music or not. It isn't just down to whether they like it or not. More people might have just found the other, so the sample size was bigger, but the facts are still the same. If you've got 1 million listens and someone else has got 1,000 listens, you're far more likely to get picked up by a label with 1 million listens, whether it's good music or not. Okay, so we'll finish on this because I feel as though it's something that a decent amount of people probably feel they know the answer to this, and it's probably not true. Mm-hmm. Because of mainstream pop, etc., is it better to say no or yes to a record label? In other words, if you're a rock band, is it even worth being signed to a record label?
That's a really convoluted question because that entirely depends on what deal you're going to get. If you're a rock band that's signed to a record label that says, right, okay, we're going to take 99% of all money you ever make and we're never going to put any money into you, that's still a record deal, but it's a shit record deal. So it doesn't really matter what genre you are. I don't think that really, really matters.
It's something that I think a lot of people feel because they feel like rock music isn't in the mainstream and therefore no one's buying it, which is just not true.
Yeah, rock music technically isn't in the mainstream as you see it by charts and major radio and
it's never
MTV
been. It's never been there,
never
ever.
Really been there.
Pop music has always been on top from the 60s till now. Pop music has been on top at all times.
And that is because what is on top is called pop music. That's what makes it pop music.
Yeah, whether it has some rock influence in it or not, the bigger music isn't playing rock.
If you'll notice, pop music throughout the years, the pop music that comes out now is nothing like the pop music that came out 5 years ago, whereas the rock music that came out now is still something like the rock music that came out 5 years ago. Pop music isn't a genre. Pop music is popular music.
People are buying rock music, people are listening to rock music, there are rock fans, there are loads of people that listen to rock music. Just because they aren't the majority of people doesn't mean that it's not worth doing, which also means that there are loads of companies that are record labels that sign rock bands and work with rock bands. Kerrang exists, Scuzz exists. It's like it has its own ecosystem and it's not in the mainstream, but it's definitely worth getting into, and there are record labels out there that would sign your rock band.
I think people that like rock aren't as vocal about it as the people that like pop. So maybe it seems that pop music is a lot more popular than it actually is, and it might seem that rock music is less popular than it actually is. But if you're going to go to a festival and you're going to see a rock band playing, you'll notice that generally, if it's a big rock band, there's a lot of people like getting into it. Like, look at Foo Fighters and bands like that. Bands of that size.
They are huge.
They're fucking huge, yeah.
A while ago, a few months ago, I was doing some one-to-one sessions with artists, and the idea was that I was giving out kind of advice. Anything that they wanted help with, I'd help with. And a woman came to that and was asking for advice, and she's a pop artist. And she actually mentioned how hard it is to be a pop artist as an entry-level artist, because gigs and festivals for low-level artists are all rock. Pretty much 99%, would you say?
And indie.
Rock and indie. It's guitar music. It's bands. And there's a DJ scene, there's a electronic music scene that is easier to get into, but there isn't a pop scene for entry-level artists. It just doesn't exist.
Because there isn't really a way of portraying it live in a way that works without a band. Like, if you're a pop singer and you have a gig and you sing to a backing track, that's not really appealing. People aren't going to come see you. People aren't going to book you. So, I mean, the only real way for pop artists to get places nowadays, I think, is on the internet.
Yeah, which is
like,
odd.
By having your own following.
Yeah, it's really odd though, because, like, kind of what I think fueled this question was pop music dominates the entire music industry, and it doesn't. It dominates the high end, the top end of the music industry. All of the big, massive artists, 90% of them, if not more, are pop artists. But as soon as you start getting to smaller and smaller artists, like your artists that are playing O2 academies or any venue up to like 2,000 people, they are rock bands or indie bands or just bands. They aren't pop artists, and those artists are probably signed to record labels, and those record labels will just work for the most part with bands.
I would probably say that most big pop music is the kind of music that has been manufactured by a record label. They will get someone who's in the modern climate anyway, they'll get someone who's big on the internet, they've been singing covers on YouTube or something, they'll get him in, they'll get him some songwriting lessons, they'll pump a load of money into him, and they'll get him looking like a professional musician.
That's essentially what happened to Justin Bieber.
Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what happened to Justin Bieber, and pretty much exactly what happens to a lot of artists that exist nowadays.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that the majority of the record labels that those artists are signed to are the same record labels. So you've got like Sony, Warner, Universal. I think there's a few really big independent labels that sign pop artists. Other than that, all the other record labels sign indie bands, rock bands, metal bands.
I think that the main reason that pop artists find it difficult in like the mid ranges and the lower ranges of the industry is because pop artists don't populate this industry. The way that a pop artist works is they start off really small, then a big record label comes in, and picks them up and drops them up here, and they are instantly there. And that's kind of the overnight sensation thing, that a lot of pop artists don't work their way up playing the toilet tour and playing a bit bigger gigs and a bit bigger gigs. I can't fucking speak. They are placed in the position that they are because it's pop.
Yeah, they go from kind of trying to get anyone and everyone to listen to their music with limited success to all of a sudden maybe Simon Cowell picks them up and then goes, okay, we're going to put millions in, and then it seems like they're an overnight success. I mean, you've got a few exceptions with that, like Ed Sheeran.
But he released 18 multiple times.
Yeah,
exactly,
I
that's my
wouldn't...
point. He did the grind, and a lot of pop artists don't necessarily do that same kind of grind, but...
Originally he wasn't a pop artist though, he was a
That's very
singer-songwriter, acoustic guy,
with incorporating like rap in there, so... Yeah, but I guess your question was more around rock bands than pop artists. There are more opportunities out there for entry-level and emerging artists. There are more opportunities out there for rock bands than there are pop artists.
I think it's easier for rock bands to get from low level to mid level, but a lot harder for rock bands to get from mid level to high level,
yes.
Which is where pop artists excel.
Yeah. I would argue that some of that comes down to the fact that rock artists aren't as good at writing songs in terms of hooks and catchy bits. I know that's like not great to say, but I think that's true. The general populace wants some nice simple melody to kind of latch onto. It's the really catchy thing, and I don't think the majority of bands are any good at writing really catchy, popular hooks, and that is what takes you from mid-level to a world-class artist, in my opinion.
I think one of the other problems is association. Like, a lot of common people and just like people who listen to the radio all the time, they will associate rock music with like Iron Maiden and death metal and shit like that. And because of that, they just assume that all music that has guitar in it is like that, and they will never give it a chance.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, a lot of people who've been into rock music their entire life will associate all pop music with fucking Drake or Justin Bieber or shit like that. And because of that, they'll never give pop music a chance. And that is why we have such a big divide with rock music and pop music. I mean, that divide is kind of blending a little bit with the advent of platforms like Spotify, where you can find artists that bridge the gap real easily.
Yeah, you can find the little
Don
niches
Brocco.
and stuff. Yeah, I mean, like an artist like Don Brocco, as Autumn says from the stands. Like an artist like Don Brocco that's doing really kind of like pop vocals with a little bit of grit in there over quite heavy modern rock with some even like metal aspects in there. It's essentially catchy pop music, but it's really heavy. And that kind of artist really doesn't fit into rock or pop, and it sits quite nicely in the middle. But in terms of the conversation that we've just been having about how pop artists have this thing of struggling down there, Don Brocco would be completely categorised as a rock artist because of the situation they're in, because they're a band, even though their music may have some pop in there.
Do you know who else was categorised as a rock artist?
Go on.
21 Pilots.
Yes.
Because there were two of them and one of them played the drums.
I would argue that their journey was similar to a rock artist. They did years of doing albums that kind of did kind of well and then they went viral and are now a pop artist. I think that they had a transition when they brought their third album out, and they went from a band that kind of did the grind and did the thing to now they are that kind of, not manufactured, but very invested in, and the media is all over, like a pop artist. Maybe they're just one of those bands that has broken through that, but they do kind of make pop music. They make pop music, mostly, but did the journey of a band. Because there's more than one of them? I don't know. They aren't manufactured and they make their own music, so... Don't know, 21 Pilots is a weird one. Maybe we should do an entire video about 21 Pilots, just
I
about
think you
how
should do
that...
an entire video on
No,
21
just
Pilots.
like, I mean more kind of a discussion of who and how they work, because there aren't many artists like them. Don't know. Either way, that was a video about record labels. Maybe we'll do another one like this at some point soon. If there's anything that you are still confused about record labels, by all means ask questions in the comments of this video, and we'll either answer them in the comments or we'll take them and use them for another video a few months down the line. If you want to see some more videos from this series, click on... I don't remember which.
It's this side.
Is it that side?
Yeah.
Do you actually know it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, do that, and if you want to see our best of furthers, click on my side of the screen. Cool. Right, I've got a gig to go to.
I gotta go move house.
Cool. Right. See you next week.
I'll be one of them annoying studio audiences that you get.